as we have done in the past as the Municipal Edge, together with our partners, Future Cities Africa. You will be learning a lot and gaining from this conversation, because we have said from the beginning of the year that our focus this year is moving towards just having the conversations. It's how do we take these ideas to action, and moreover, the lived realities by South Africans. This is Zolani Zonyane. I'm the head of editorial within the Municipal Edge. And let me thank the team, as I usually do, that consistently work with us as we bring these webinars within the Municipal Edge. But beyond the Municipal Edge, we've got Dan from Future Cities Africa. Thanks, Dan, and the team as well. Without you, without, I'll say, your support, your dedication, your commitment in ensuring that we utilize this medium to interact with the many of South Africans. Thanks for that. And also we've got Sangofa in our graphics, who are actually our partners. And again, to our audience, welcome. It's always great to have you in these conversations. And as we usually do, your comments, your inputs, your questions are most welcome, because without you, we can't just have the conversation amongst ourselves. We don't sit with all the solutions. Some of the solutions sit with you. It is therefore important, as the conversation goes on, you use the chat box question and answer function in terms of expressing your views, asking the questions that you might be having. Today, we've got quite an interesting topic on smart cities. And again, there are people when I converse with, specifically on this topic and many others, who believe if we talk smart cities, we talk the future. Similarly to technology, there are people who believe technology is in the future. My argument, which has always been and will be today, if we talk smart cities, these are lived realities. We can argue about the coverage, the access, but smart cities, for me, it's the reality we are living in. As we explore this particular topic today, we'll look more on the smart city implementation trends, what is currently happening out there, partnerships, innovations, and collaborations, which we believe are quite important if we are to experience the full potential and what these smart cities offers. But most importantly, the enablers and restraints for these smart cities, because, as I say, I can attest to a lived reality, but it doesn't mean we don't have restraints, we don't have challenges. That also, I believe, my guests will touch on, and also the strategies and priorities on, as we talk smart cities, as we implement this concept, how do we then position it strategically in our planning, in our resource allocation, but how do we then make it a priority as we do the plans or put together the plans within our municipalities, even provincial governments and national governments. But beyond that, the private sector, the role it must play in packaging the strategies and the priorities. But as I've indicated, the role of technology in this implementation of smart cities. But today is not really about myself and my partners, as I've indicated. We've got our panel with esteemed guest of speakers. We've got Collen Lethu from the World Bank, who will be taking us specifically today through a lead presentation, which will also, I'll say, provocate some thinking, position the conversation that we will be having. Lethu is joined by both Philip and Collen from business engineering. And again, it's great to have you back this year, as we have hosted business engineering in the previous year. But beyond that, we've got Trevor. Trevor, in our communication, we've indicated that we'll be having Umiyelani with Ntiyiso Consulting, but Umiyelani has been represented this morning by Trevor, who is the managing director in the revenue consulting arm of the Ntiyiso Group. And we will be joined by our colleague from the city of Joburg, that's city of Johannesburg, Monique, who is the head of innovation partnerships, focusing on smart city office within the city of Johannesburg. Without really taking it up to me, as I've indicated, we've got our guests, and perhaps as you get in, Lethu, just a brief introduction and background, and then you can take us through your presentation, which will then be followed by a broader conversation with the guests that we have, and also our audience that has joined us today. Let me hand it over to you, Lethu, and take us through.
Great. Good morning once again, Zolani, fellow panelists, and everybody online who's joined the session today. Yeah, thank you very much for having invited me. I was conversing with Dan and indicating that I've been an avid follower of some of the sessions in recent years, so really great to be here today. So, yeah, brief intro on myself. I'm an urban economist at the World Bank currently. I joined the bank in 2019, and one of the first assignments that landed on my desk was the Smart Cities dialogue, which I'll obviously get into the specifics of the work that the bank is doing. Prior to that, I was in the private sector for some few years. And before that, really my grounding has been at the city of Joburg for 12 years of my professional career, where I spent time in the planning department, in the human settlement department, as well as economic development. So I'm really fortunate for having had that experience. I think it's given me a very rounded view on municipal issues, issues of governance and development. So really looking forward to share my thoughts on the Smart Cities agenda. In your intro, Zolani, I think you covered a lot of areas, and I was quite careful to choose exactly what I was going to talk about this morning. I'd heard you come across as an expert in this space. I have been working on smart cities. Is something that I've been passionate over many years, but what I've decided to do is share just some global views on the topic, and then get into the specifics of the work that I happen to be leading on behalf of the DBSA and the World Bank in South Africa, and talk about how some of the elements that you spoke to around implementation can be addressed through the approach that we've adopted on the Smart Cities program. So the first question for me, whenever I think of smart cities, is what is the visualization that most of us have, or what visualization is invoked whenever we think and talk smart cities? And, you know, I'm pretty certain that if you were to Google smart city and go to the images tab, you're likely to find images of this nature, which are oftentimes very fancy looking, very futuristic, as you mentioned in your intro. And not to get into the debate whether these are right or wrong, but I think it automatically indicates that there's a particular leaning towards smart cities being around technology and fancy elements, and we'll get into that as we move along. I think the biggest learning I've come across in recent years on thinking about smart cities and being engaged on the topic is that it's an ever-evolving concept, moving from ideas of sustainability with the Amsterdam Digital City and many other developments over the years, or innovations that have been punted by different countries, different cities over the years. I think a lot of us reflect and think of the Barcelona Smart City World Congress, which is one of those landmark features in the smart city landscape. And over the years, obviously, it's increased in intensity. I think the India 100 smart cities, of which the World Bank was involved, was one of those watershed moments for the World Bank in particular, just thinking about how to really take this on a broader scale and ensure that cities are able to derive the benefits. But I think over time, and what we often see in terms of the technology is the current phase that we're in, where it is a lot more about augmented reality and the tech solutions that are being advanced in a lot of the developing nations. And again, often for me, I sometimes think of ourselves as a country and wonder where we are in the spectrum of the smart city evolution. What I also find to be a very distinct transition of the smart city agenda is one where the city was often seen as a product, to present day innovations where the city is now a broader platform, a platform for internal city departments to think more creatively and efficiently about how they service the end users at the end of the day. A completely different picture from the fragmented approach where the city departments would have individual approaches or projects that are not talking to each other, to this holistic approach that we were in now, which is a lot more about interoperability of systems and how to make sure that whatever is being developed speaks not only to city or within city departments, but has a real impact on the user at the end of the day. And just speaking a little bit more about this issue of what the platform is versus the product. I like this image that I received from my colleagues in South Korea, whom I've worked extensively with as well, who talk about products being the many different elements that make up the city platform. So any innovation that is on its own is simply a product, but as soon as you think of them in an integrated manner, hinged on issues of institutional infrastructure, the service infrastructure, digital infrastructure, to combine all of these, is when you actually start to see the city as a platform where citizens derive a lot more benefits from the city. So in South Africa, we've also been conversing around smart cities for quite some years. And this may not be 100% foolproof, but we took a 10-year review just on some of the critical points within which the smart city language came to the fore, starting with the National Development Plan in 2012. And over the years, there's been a series of innovations in the policy landscape, which have progressively moved us towards the smart city conversation. The localization of the urban agenda in 2018. In 2019, there was a specific smart city initiative on paving the way to support cities addressing pertinent issues there. In 2020, there was a discussion paper on smart cities, sustainable cities, and settlements. And I think a lot of people would reference the 2020 announcement around the fourth industrial revolution, but quickly following that was the president's call for smart cities during his State of the Nation address, which I think has sparked a lot of conversation on the topic. But during the different stages at no particular point, but a lot of the cities have been thinking about smart cities and actually have been producing smart city approaches. A lot of the time, these have been vendor driven. So the key criticism around that is that a lot of the vendor driven strategies are often about a specific service and not necessarily thinking of the broader smart city agenda within a metropolitan environment or a municipal environment, which obviously brings up the issue of interoperability when you then introduce other services that would need to integrate with those vendor-driven solutions that have been hunted. And again, I mean, just in talking about smart cities, there's also been a lot of criticism in recent years, as I'll share shortly on the South African perspective. But I think this one from MIT was really critical in bringing us all back safely to the ground, that the emphasis seems to have been on the wrong part of the concept of smart cities. It has taken a very strong leaning towards smart, which is all the technology, rather than the city, which is a lot more about the users and the user experience, how they interface with government services, how they feel in the urban environment, issues of safety, etc. And so I think there's a gradual shift in policy thinking around smart cities needing to come back to be about the people at the end of the day. And South Africa has also had many viewpoints on the concept of smart cities and criticizing this from many different angles. Again, I think it's a lot of the criticism has emerged as a result of the announcement on smart cities and people really thinking whether we need new build cities or whether we need to be going back to the basics and focusing on fixing what is already on the ground. And just to support that point, these are the sort of realities that we're facing as a country. In the city of Joburg, there was the recent explosion, the bad buildings or hijacked building that was tragically on fire, loss of life, issues of unemployment. But if you're a city user, especially in the CBDs, some of the key things that will impact you are issues of crime and the crime that you see in these various images. And so in thinking about the smart cities work and how we could advance it, we have obviously done quite a bit of research, and we came across the Roland Berger Smart City Index, which was talking about the different bottlenecks that hamper the implementation of smart cities in particular. And I mean, just some interesting stats around the number of cities that first start off thinking of, we want to have a smart city strategy, to those that eventually publish one. So 250 with the ambition, and only 153 would ultimately publish a smart city strategy. And of those, only 8 would actually move towards actual implementation of those strategies. So there is a global challenge around this fascination with smart cities, on how to really see them come to light at the end of the day. There's a host of issues that lead to this bottleneck, as you can see over there. But I thought, let me just highlight a few of them, which relate to the issue of financing. And I think it's an obvious one, in the sense that at the end of the day, you need to have the resources behind whatever innovation you're trying to bring forward. Another stumbling block that cities encounter is that they are often very siloed approaches, rather than being cross-sectoral and addressing many city challenges. If the smart city strategy does not address issues of investment prioritization, then I think it also falls short on being able to drive the city towards a particular agenda. And obviously issues of capacity and project management, and what those behind the cities are able to do. And that then takes us to the work that we're doing, and this question around the innovative approaches to deal with these bottlenecks. And I think, with the DBSA Smart Cities program, done in partnership with the World Bank, we have really started an important conversation on how we could move the needle on smart city strategies towards implementation. And in designing the program, the DBSA had a very specific mandate to the bank that this work is no different, or doesn't deviate from the core objective of transcending the infrastructure challenges and being able to address those development challenges that are impacting cities. And we then designed the program around 3 key pockets of activities. The first being the smart city programming, smart city project preparation, which is a lot more about understanding the environment governing cities, and what a smart city actually can do to help the cities, to then thinking about smart city project implementation. So moving from this planning towards the actual implementation, what are the key elements around it? And then obviously the issue of capacity building that I indicated as a key gap earlier on became the third and most important element of the work that we've been doing. So I'm just going to briefly, and I'm mindful of time as well, Zolani, so let me briefly just talk through these 3 areas and just what we have done. Fortunately, with the World Bank, we have access to a wide net of global experts, and we relied on our colleagues from the UK, who presented to us the British standards on smart cities, PD 100. And the framework that we use this framework to then diagnose each of the cities where we were involved in. It's around the 7 smart city thematic areas, from leadership down to the technical elements of digital asset management, physical asset management. And we use this to assess where the cities felt they were. So through a number of workshops, through surveys conducted in the cities, we were able to get an outcome of where each of the cities felt they were in terms of their current assessments. And then over time, we've been working with the cities to then define an action plan of their ambitions. In most instances, it's a 5 to a 10-year ambition plan. We then said to the smart city officers that we're working with was that, now to make the strategic link between the strategy and the infrastructure on the ground, we need to prioritize sectors. And we did this again through extensive surveys and workshops with the city. And interestingly enough, we'd given a long list of sectors to all of the cities. And the responses that we received were that the issues of public safety, issues of water and energy came out tops in different orders for the 3 cities, Joburg, eThekwini, and Tshwane. But essentially, those were the 3 most important development areas for the cities, with ICT and data management as a cross-cutting theme. And we have then taken this to the next level of the support around smart city project implementation, to then say, once we've done all of the assessments and the maturity analyses on each of the cities, the detailed diagnostic reports, how do we then lean on the British Standards Institute again, so that we are able now to tie project to smart city solutions? And there's 3 components that we've been working there on: smart city thinking, how to introduce smart practices, and also smart measurements for the projects that have been selected under the top 3 priority sectors. It's a bit of detail on what those plans would ultimately contain, is that for each of the sector departments, or sector priorities, we would then develop terms of reference, pre-feasibility and pre-feasibility stage, which would then be taken to the next phase of the work. But there's also a lot of work that we've been doing around designing change management approaches as part of these strategies. How do you support the city so that they are able to see these strategies come to life? And the most critical one, again, relating to the bottlenecks that I highlighted earlier, identifying funding and financing mechanisms and instruments. And here, not just thinking of the city's resources and how it could structure land-based financing instruments, but talking about special purpose vehicles, talking about the role of the private sector, which you mentioned earlier on, Zolani, and how other development financing institutions, in addition to the DBSA, could play a meaningful contribution to financing. And then, let's skip very quickly. Just on the final one, on the smart city capacity development. So I'm hoping that colleagues have come across our smartcity.za publication, for instance, which we used as a means to create a community of practice and just rile up some interest around the topic. So we've covered a range of issues, including the key focus sectors, including issues of just the basics of the smart city principle in the South African environment. We've had a series of workshops with the cities. in really thinking through what are the solutions to smart cities. And a lot of the time we've actually gathered the cities in the same room so that there's this peer-to-peer learning and cross-pollination of ideas, challenges, and how cities are ultimately overcoming them. And knowing that Monique would be in the session this morning, I made sure to include a picture of Monique in one of our strategy sessions around the peer-to-peer engagements. And then finally, just to give some final thoughts, for me, I think the biggest issue around smart cities, going back to the criticism by MIT, is that technology is nothing more than an enabler. If you get what the people's agendas are first and foremost, then you're able to deliver smart city solutions. Frameworks and policies, I think they're really useful. I'm not going to get into the details of the country's frameworks, but for me, that's not enough. I'm sure we all know that cities can draw down on so many policy documents online, but I think a careful process like the one that's been undertaken by the DBSA and the World Bank in walking the cities through the smart city strategy formulation is absolutely key to making sure that these strategies at the end of the day see the light. And then finally, it's the point about just getting things done. In so many respects, when you think of our challenges, a lot of them just relate to this inability to move from strategization to actual implementation. And what we're seeing from all the global cities we've engaged with is that it's about starting. It's about testing, being brave enough to test and bring about innovation. And if those innovations happen to work well, then it's about scaling them and replicating them in different parts of the city. Zolani, I hope I have not taken too long, but Daniel did say at some point that he'll give me free license to take a bit more than 15 minutes. But I hope it's been useful. I'll end the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Lethu, for, I would say, that insightful, informative input that you've provided. And again, as you are going through the presentation and you've touched on, I'll say, things that are dear to our heart as the municipal edge. We can talk smart cities, as you say, and you've also showed us some pictures on, I would say, absence and poor service delivery to a greater extent. How do we begin to match all this? Because it's one thing to talk a smart city in its broader sense, but does it result to a lived experience by an ordinary citizen? I said earlier on, in the metro where I live, for an example, there are some small steps that make me say some things are being done. There are innovations, there are actions on the ground. But again, if it only gets limited to certain pockets of municipalities, even within the metros, because I live in Ekurhuleni, for an example. I don't think and believe, and it's a fact, my experience with a citizen in Ntiyiso could definitely be different, yet we live within the same city. And you've raised quite also some very important points in the presentation itself, that of the implementation. And I wouldn't say only on smart cities being vendor-driven in terms of the solutions, but as you were transitioning to the end, you raised quite an important point of human capital development, because we can talk about technology, as you say, but there is a people element behind it. And I always argue, and we can have a conversation, until we go that route of building that capacity, which was envisaged, in fact, in our national development plan, I think more than 10 years ago, in building the state capacity and the state capability. There is a lot that still needs to be done from that end in ensuring that it only doesn't end as a concept, but it also goes towards being a lived experience. I've indicated earlier on to our audience, Monique, that you'll be joining us. And as I transition now to that part of the conversation, in terms of the conversation itself, I will be allowing you in, and for the benefit of our audience, Monique is with the city of Johannesburg, as I've indicated earlier on. I'll say occupying quite an important position within the city of Johannesburg, being the head of innovation partnership within the Smart City Office. And Lethu mentioned, Monique, quite, I'll say, things that need to be in place, amongst those being the collaborations, the partnerships that need to exist, probably to reflect around the work that you do within the city, and linking to the presentation basically that Lethu has delivered this morning. And most importantly, you've been in one of the sessions as well, as Lethu indicated. So we are talking with someone, or having a conversation with someone who understands, who is part and parcel of this smart city concept implementation. At this point, let me hand over to you, Monique, just for your reflections, your contributions, and your inputs regarding the smart city concept itself. And what I normally do specifically when we get to municipalities like the city of Joburg, because our audience sometimes get tempted to ask our panelists some questions beyond the focus, and I usually but I believe and know that if something comes, if it's not something that we can deal with it in this session, we normally also direct those for the benefit of our audience. Over to you, Monique, and once more, welcome to our session today.
Thank you, Zolani. Thank you, Collen, both colleagues. And firstly, I'd like to wish everyone a happy Heritage Day. May we use it as a chance to honor all the ancestors before us and all the culture and decisions that have brought us to this point today. And may it influence us to make sure that we are making life better for our next generations and creating our own heritage. With that said, the smart city, as the head of innovation in the smart city office for the city of Joburg, I think one of the most important things, as Lethu even mentioned, is changing the focus away from being about technology and being about process, and making sure that it's about people. When we look at where we are as a city, we also have to look at an as is, and Collen had mentioned an as is, but the as is was kind of looking at us as an institution, kind of as the city of Johannesburg as a municipality. But we need to start looking at an as is broadly about our cities, in order for us to really understand what it is that we need to do to become smarter. And why we need to do it. I mean, sometimes it's not the how, it's the why. So if we look at an as is of the city of Johannesburg, I think we all see how there's urban decay, and it's visible urban decay that's happening. Not only that, but then it's our experiences on a day-to-day, the lack of electricity, the water shortages, the potholes that we're experiencing, the number of people who are now being homeless, and the number of people who now have to crowd into these dangerous buildings. And so, we really have to get to a point where we are honest with ourselves and say, what is the as is for us as a city as it relates to the people and the experiences of the people? And then the other P that we need to think about is the prosperity of our people. And that should then be guiding us into what smart city decisions we're making. Because smart cities is really just about how do we become more efficient, more effective, and reach scale faster in order for us to influence the trajectory of our children in the next generation. Our next heritage days going forward, we want to be able to say that we have actually contributed to the well-being of our generations to come. So with that, if I look at Collen's presentation, obviously one of the biggest things to getting that really poignant review of ourselves and looking at ourselves in the mirror is the capacity that will help us to do that. And when we talk about co-creating a city as a smart city, it's not just about what the municipality does, it's about how we bring in the small business sector, the big business sector, the communities, the individuals, our students, universities. The co-creation has to be something that we facilitate. And in doing that, we then create the capacity that we need to change the trajectory of where the city is going. So one of the things that we are trying to do as the city of Johannesburg, and which the World Bank has been helping us to do, is to kind of coordinate how do we bring various stakeholders together, ourselves as municipalities, but then also looking further afield as to how do we bring in those other contributors to the well-being and the creation of a smart city for Johannesburg. And then we have to create a facilitative process in order to do that. So we are looking at innovation, and those partnerships in innovation that we're referring to speaks directly to Collen's slide of we have to start somewhere. So how do we go about finding out the as is? What are the biggest problems, putting them in front of ourselves, and then presenting them to those various stakeholders and getting ideas? Because part of the issue that we find as Johannesburg, at least over the 16 years I've been in the city, is that often it is how can the city change things versus how do we work with communities and businesses to change things, because we are not the authors of many of the ideas. We can contribute budgets, but we cannot be the only ones who are implementing. So starting somewhere is looking at those innovative approaches, those things that might be simple, but they really change and transform people's experiences in the city. And that's also the problem. We can go and get these high-paid consultants, but then they will create solutions that are devoid of community experiences, and then it doesn't necessarily tick the boxes that are required. And so then we end up with more complaints and then putting money into managing a system that actually does not respond to the need. So we feel like going forward, the testing of innovation, the piloting of innovation across the city, across our different regions, will help us to find more wins that we can then invest in for scale. But then that also helps us save money in the long run. Let's put money behind, pilots that are winners and that speak to the hearts and the minds and the trajectory that we want to go to. And then we scale them and put more money into them because they have shown some form of success. And then we replicate going across the different city regions and into our sister cities locally and our sister cities abroad. So I think that is kind of how I would like to engage with the presentation that Lethu gave, and to kind of point in the direction that the city of Johannesburg is looking at. And we will be presenting later on this year the process that we are hoping to expand, the co-collaboration, the co-production, and the co-creation of a smart city. into 2024-25. Thank you.
No, thanks a lot for that, Monique. And again, from where we stand as the Municipal Edge together with Future Cities Africa, it's always great to have people like you in these conversations who are part and parcel of these innovations that we are talking about, these concepts that we are talking about, because Lethu made a great point, which I referred to earlier on, of these solutions that we talk about being vendor-driven. And again, you've managed to touch on how do we then bring all the stakeholders together in this journey as we innovate, as we collaborate. And on that point, let me bring you, Philip, first, before I take Alan, because I know there is great work that you are doing in the Western Cape in particular on advancing, I wouldn't say only smart cities, but also in creating what I would call easily accessible municipalities, sustainable municipalities. And I think it is great to bring you at this point in terms of the work that you are doing. And also, as I've indicated earlier on, there is a lot that still needs to be done on the concept of smart cities. But we can't run away from the fact that there is work that is being done towards the full realization of what we will call a fully fledged smart city in future, but work is being done currently, which then also links to what I said earlier on. There are some lived experiences as we talk smart cities, but yes, still probably exclusive in their nature, because until every citizen can not only attest to the concept, but can stand up and say, yes, I live in a smart city based on these particular conditions that I'm living in, which I believe business engineering is part and parcel of that ecosystem towards the full realization of the smart cities. Let me hand over to you, Philip, first, and then I'll allow Alan as providing additional inputs on the points we'll be making.
Thank you very much, Zolani, and thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this very interesting discussion. Smart cities is a topical issue globally, and if we just look at what's happening in Africa, we have very different challenges that we face from the southernmost to the northernmost area. If you Google smart city progress, just look at the top smart city on the continent is Cairo, and Cairo have no different challenges than we have in the city of Joburg or the city of Tshwane, with urban city decay and just getting services to communities in a reliable and a predictable manner. We've been very fortunate to work with the provincial government in the Western Cape, and we're also busy with a few of the other provinces. And it started off by focusing on the reduction of red tape, where they said, right, if we want to enable people to effectively participate in the business of government, we have to make it easier for people to interact with the organizations. The smart city concept is an expensive concept. If you take it to a small town like Laingsburg, it's prohibitively expensive if you take it to a town like Prince Albert, which are small villages, Abatolusi, where I grew up in Natal. They'll never, although they aspire, they'll never be able to reach these ultimate smart city goals without proper guidance and capacity initiatives from the national and the provincial sphere of government. So what we've started doing with regards to the red tape reduction programs was to look at the way that we can address the challenges with urbanization, very specifically development. If you want to build a factory in Mossel Bay or a warehouse in Vredendal, your architects live in Johannesburg, your engineers are situated in eThekwini, and it's a massive exercise to coordinate the efforts to get all these people to come to the municipality to initiate a process. What typically happens is that your application arrives at the municipality and it's wrong. Okay, it's rejected because you didn't submit a receipt. To the municipal official, he's doing his job, he's ticking his boxes. To the developer and the participants in the project, it's huge costs that they have to incur, and it's the couriering of building plans, etc., across the country. Really speaking to huge red tape, inefficiencies, bureaucratic sort of frameworks that have been created. What we've been able to do is to build an environment where we allow a person to submit a building plan from anywhere in the world to do a development anywhere in the country, technically. And in doing that, we are enabling small cities, small towns, villages across the country, Plettenberg Bay, Knysna. They might be affluent, but they're small. They're small cities. Oudtshoorn, for instance, are now able to attract global investment through a digital interface that we've been deployed. And technically, it didn't really qualify as a smart city initiative, but it qualifies as a smart technology deployment that addresses the requirements across multiple sectors. We've done similar initiatives with event management, for instance. BMW recently did a recording of a global ad on the garden route of South Africa. The entire application was facilitated electronically from Germany, and nobody came to South Africa. The first thing that anybody saw was the containers being dropped off where the camera crews set up site. The entire approval process has been done digitally or electronically. Now, one can speak about these things very loosely, but one needs to just be quiet for a minute and understand the efficiencies that have been introduced in actually what has been achieved through the deployment of the technologies. I'm very excited about the smart city approach or the digitalization approach, especially where we're at in our country and on the continent. There's huge opportunities for us to work together. As I said, we've been fortunate to participate in a few very exciting initiatives. I don't know, Alan, if you perhaps want to maybe just follow on to what we've been doing with the citizen engagement and those types of initiatives. Thank you, Collen.
Alan, you can take
all right.
it.
Okay, I think I can expand a little bit on what Philip has said. The one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we've experienced in the last 7-8 years that we've been part of this initiative of becoming smart city. There's so many definitions, but I just want to break it down from business engineering's perspective. We focus on smart city as to be able for a stakeholder, whether they're a service provider or whether they're a taxpayer, to be able to interact with the municipality services without physically having to go to the municipality. So in that definition, we exclude the smart city or the smart metering, things that is not directly related to delivering of a service. So this is our definition. That's what we focus on. And therefore, business process and business process optimization is a key component of that element, of that part of the definition of smart city. And what we have found is a major stumbling block is everyone wants to be smart, but until your internal business processes support that the receipt of an electronic application for a land use application or building plan application or event application, business licenses, whatever we do, unless your internal business processes are not clearly defined or even electronic, it will become nearly impossible for that municipality to be able to accept electronic application. And that goes from just receiving a simple service request on a pothole or waste that's lying next to the street. Unless you've got your internal processes in place, it's nearly impossible to measure and to manage the performance of the internal department. So what we have found is that even though we focus on becoming smart, a key element is first to look at the internal processes. Yes, and once you become electronic, receiving electronic applications, that once again directly influence the internal operations. So maybe just to expand on what Philip has said is that, yes, we've got we've achieved a lot in the last year. I don't know, hundreds of thousands of building plan applications over multiple municipalities. I think it's 26 municipalities at this stage. It has been very effective because we're focusing on the internal operations first. And I think the challenges that we have with these smaller municipalities are very different from what Monique has explained from that large, huge metropolitan environment. That is, the challenges are very different. You know? But one of the things that we have done that I think is key to the success is to focus on the persona of who we're delivering a service to. So the architect, and focusing on the architect and to have a single interface for an architect across all the municipalities has had a huge impact on the success of our approach. Where our architect doesn't have an interface to an Oudtshoorn municipality and a different one to a Bito municipality or a Vreden or Matsikama. They have a single interface. And what we have found is that is where we got the support from the architects. And from now, you know, if you look at the majority of municipalities don't accept a paper-based building plan application anymore. It has to be done electronically. It has to be done through the Western Cape portal for them to accept it. The municipalities, there's other municipalities that can't participate in that process because the internal processes are completely manual. And therefore, they rely on the distribution of a manual building plan between the different departments. And that is the biggest issue. So for us to fix that, the first thing that we have to do is to improve the internal operations and making those processes electronically. And because of our presence and our history for the last 23 years in local government of optimizing the business processes, we as an organization could easily help them, right, with best practices. And we have not found one municipality whose business processes are exactly the same. They are all different because of the way they're structured, whether they've got harbors or whether they've got airports. That looks fundamentally different. The organizational structures are looking different. Delegated authorities look different. The different committees look different. And therefore, we have established a technology to help them custom their processes to what they require, and then integrate those processes to a standard portal from where communication, interaction, bi-directional interaction takes place with the different stakeholders, like event planners, architects, and so forth. The other thing that I might just want to add is that it became very important to standardize, standardize data, the sharing of data between our municipalities. A district municipality for municipal health requires the cadastre that's been maintained by the local municipality. And standardizing and sharing data becomes a key element between for the success of the smart city approach. I think that's maybe I don't know whether there's anything else, Philip, that you think I should be adding. I think that's more or less it. So, Nani, if
I
there's
think we're
questions
good.
around that, then I can answer that.
Yeah, I think we're good on that, Alan. And I think, you know, one of the important things about the business process is that we shouldn't underestimate is there's a lot of apps flying around the country. Every municipality has its own app, and every civics organization has its own app. But you very soon realize that apps don't fix potholes. It's great to report, but if you don't look at the business process behind the application, it's really a futile exercise. So one can never underestimate the importance of the quality of the business processes, and then the quality of the data that Alan has just discussed with regards to cadastre information being up to date, census information being available readily at different pressure points. So it's very interesting. But thank you very much, Lonnie. Thanks, Alan.
No, thanks a lot for those inputs. And as I'm making the notes, I think there's just two things as I transition also towards my next panelist, and then we're going to have an open conversation, and of course taking the questions from our audience. You've mentioned something that is very important, Philip, specifically on attracting investment, ensuring that there is economic activity, because if that one act is possible for one municipality, it's something that is being done in other municipalities as well. And one imagines if that can be replicated, it means a lot for the municipalities themselves, because remember, every economic activity or opportunity. Now, I'm going to wear my hat as a revenue management, I'll say, lover within municipalities. Revenue base of a municipality, then it's very important to build that base, ensure that it's sustainable, but most importantly, the job opportunities that are brought by those economic activities. From the side of a municipality, we then talk about affordability and payment of services, which is one of the key critical components, which will then ideally assist the municipalities as we talk about the cost. Yes, they cannot foot the cost and the bill towards that transition, but I think, Lethu, as we transition to the conversation itself, it will be a case of how would the institutions that exist, the World Bank, your DBSA, and other funding agencies, take into account those small rural municipalities that must not be left behind when we talk about these concepts and actually leading to the lived experiences of our people. And then, Alan, you've also mentioned the question of the business processes, which Philip also touched on. It goes back to building the capacity. Do we have the fit for purpose human capital that really needs to take and run with these particular initiatives, which is one critical element as we get to the conversation. I think I'll be driving more on my side to say, how do we build that human capital to ensure that we've got capacity within our institutions who are able to run and collaborate on these particular solutions. Trevor, as I bring you in to join and provide inputs to this conversation, I was part of I'll say, by Ntiyiso Consulting Group in 2022. There was a feature on the future of cities. And again, the conversation today is not different from what we were talking about when I heard Mielani on Power Talk on this particular session, to say, how do we ensure that we prioritize correctly? How do we ensure that these innovations, these developments are people-centric? And as I continue to refer to it and say, we can talk about these innovations and developments. If they leave people out, can we still say we are achieving what we intend to achieve as we traverse these innovations? Let me bring you in, Trevor, just your inputs and comments, and probably linking to the feature that I'm referring to on the future of cities. Welcome, Trevor. You can take it over.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Zolani, for the for the opportunity. The issue that you've actually touched on is a critical touch point in any organization, in any country, in any institution, where all our solutions that we are trying to drive at need to be customer-centric. If you look at the presentation that was shared initially, it is clear that, you know, tech is an enabler, but people are actually sitting at the center of everything. Monique also mentioned, you know, same concept as well. What I'm trying to get at is all our solutions that we want to implement should be customer centric. The moment you don't have buy-in from our customers, the moment you don't have buy-in from the citizens, you should be rest assured that those concepts won't fly. So there's definitely need for, you know, customer engagements and get an appreciation and understanding of what is the intention and the benefit of, you know, the topic of, you know, smart cities. You look at collaboration. Talk of collaboration. Collaboration is basically talking to people. You look at an institution like a municipality, the moment there is no integration between, you know, departments and the business, you know, re-engineering that, you know, Alan has also touched on, would actually then sum it up and take it home that all the initiatives that we are trying to do, if the customer is actually put in the picture and is the focus, we are then able to actually achieve this. I also looked at, you know, the sector prioritization in the presentation, which the three major municipalities are actually focusing on your water, your public safety, and your energy. If you look at these three components that become priority, they are all touch points for our day-to-day lives as customers. And the integration, I actually had an engagement with one of you know, service provider that you want to partner with, where they've come up with a solution that integrates your water and your electricity you know, metering concept. Right now in most municipalities, you've got your energy department running their water meters, and obviously feeds into the billing system. But when you now go into a management meeting, each one is actually presenting their performance or progress under a different on different platforms. So if you have an integrated collaborative approach where you've got one system that is actually used for the implementation of these services, you would actually then, you know, start driving the vision and the implementation in regards to smart cities. You did indicate that there is work that is being done. You gave a very good, you know, analogy that you're staying in Kempton Park and someone in Tembisa might not be having the same benefits as you are, but you're actually in the same municipality. This then goes back to customer centricity. Are we having those conversations with our customers that we are actually driving, you know, development, and we're actually operating at the same wavelength? And then that then sums it up together in regards to the smart cities that we want to drive at.
No, thanks a lot, Trevor, for those inputs. And again, as I've indicated, within the Ntiyiso group, there is work and conversations that are currently taking place from that end. And as we get to the conversation, perhaps let me ask you to have your cameras on so that we can have this as a more personal interaction, because without seeing you as we converse, it really creates that vacuum. But I want to start with you, Lethu, specifically on two issues. One being something that came from Philip as he was providing his inputs on the issue of the cost that is attached versus the size of the municipalities we have, not only in South Africa for that matter, I would say worldwide. In terms of the support that I would say the financing partners, in a lack of a better word, because I don't want to limit that also to World Bank, to DBSA, as we have mentioned, but how do we open that financing to municipalities, as Philip has indicated? You might have your Laingsburgs, your Ghana lands in the Western Cape, and many other municipalities who might be having, I would say, every municipality aspires to be part and parcel of this development. How do we then begin to support that? But there's also a question that came from our registrants. There's a question from, I would say, Monwabisi from the city of Cape Town, because you also touched on the road South Africa has taken, I think, since about 2012, because the question is more about to what extent are we being inclusive in the policy and planning space of cities, even in dealing with the issues of policy making, the issue of the bylaws. And I think also, Monique, that will be a question that will be relevant to you, as I'll allow you after Lethu. But I've got another question that you can touch on, Monique. But let me give it you an opportunity, Lethu, just to reflect on that.
Thanks, Zolani. And yeah, thanks for kicking me off with really difficult questions around financing. But you know, I'm going to be slightly controversial and reference a conversation I had with a colleague of mine who we work with on smart cities. And we were talking about the level of service that you receive at the smaller municipalities. And this guy was simply trying to have a secondary use so that he can have a bed and breakfast, right? And although it was a revenue generating opportunity for the municipality, it's taken him all of 6 months, and he still has not gotten a response. He's just being sent from pillar to post, being given reasons why he can't do what he wants to do, and this is permitted within the city's regulations, right? And it brought forward a point about these, or some of these, let me not be too generalistic, but some of these smaller municipalities literally depend on the grant system, right? And there is no impetus to be innovative and think about the revenue generating mechanisms they have on hand, right? On an annual basis, we are all seeing the Auditor General almost up in arms about resources that are being given to municipalities but aren't being used for the right reason. So for in being controversial, I'm leaning towards the fact that I think it's a wholesale transformation of government to say, we've been giving money for water, etc., all these services. What have you done as a municipality to actually better manage these resources? What systems have you put in place so that we're not seeing water rushing down streets and we just say, oh, shame you don't have the money to maintain this infrastructure of yours? So I think the first thing is to say that, you know, there's a lot of resources that should be used for the right functions. And then I think this is another point that came through with Philip and Alan around the role of the private sector. And I think Philip was even talking about the development of apps as an example, where those don't necessarily lead to service delivery. But there are so many instances when the private sector is actually wanting to be a partner to government, take over certain functionalities, but is not meeting, it doesn't come and interact with municipal officials that are actually geared and open to such partnerships, which Monique spoke to at length. It is an arduous task. It is not easy, you know, and it goes back to this issue of capacity building. And capacity building is about the right sort of tools to even bring in the partners that you need as part of your solutions on the ground. So I hope that that roundabout response buys me out of actual specifics. And then to Munabi's point about policy making, bylaws, and the issue of inclusivity. Absolutely. And again, I'm going to bank on what some of the panelists have been talking about, this issue about partnership building. Partnership building is not just with your elite and affording citizens. So if we transition as a municipality to say, we're now only going to accept land use applications that come on a system, on a technological system, on a digital system, that on its own needs to be monitored very carefully. So if, as you said, in Tembisa, you are likely to find so many people who are struggling to make ends meet, and then you suddenly say, right, now if you want your secondary dwelling to be approved, you need to use this very expensive technology that has building renditions, etc. That is not inclusive development in my eyes. You need to be very careful as a municipality to make sure that what you're presenting is in keeping with the demographics and what people on the ground are actually experiencing, the lived experience that Trevor spoke to quite clearly. You know, so I think there's always a level of caution around some of these innovations, that they should not be exclusionary and should not be making people worse off in terms of the interaction with government at the very least. Thanks.
No, thanks a lot, Lethu, for those inputs. And I will be giving you an opportunity, Monique, as I've indicated, based on this, I would say policy making. But there was a question that came from Chart van de Walt, and again, in our platform, we've got a wide spectrum of audience who is a ward councillor in Bloemfontein. It's more around the importance of where the systems have collapsed in some of our systems. And the question is, what is more important in a city where planning system has collapsed? And then he juxtaposes that with, is it a question of prioritizing development at all costs, or is it the issue of prioritizing enforcement and implementation of, I would say, the rendering of the basic services? And again, it ties back to the issue of a lived experience by a citizen. I'm not sure whether you've got any comments or inputs on that one, because for me, some of the things need to run parallel. The failure in one area should not necessarily discount other developments that should be taking place. And again, perhaps then what I was thinking about even for next year in some of our sessions, whereby we bring departments from a municipality together in this particular session, so that we are in a position to, as we engage, we don't only focus on a particular work or activity that is done by a municipality, but to have a view of how a municipality operates. Any views or comments around that, Monique?
When you talk about prioritization, I think there's always the need to find a cross-sectionality because there are so many things that a municipality has to balance. One, you have to balance who your actual taxpayers are versus those who are in need of tax spend but aren't necessarily contributing to the fiscus. And there needs to be a cross-sectionality where you're finding a benefit that inures to both parties. That means one person doesn't get as much benefits as they should, and that means the other person gets more benefits because it's part of our constitutional mandate and it's part of why we need to inject budgets into people's standard of living and livability. So when you talk about developmental, we absolutely have committed to becoming a developmental state. So development is part of every decision that has to be made in order to try to figure out how to transition ourselves away from this apartheid legacy. I mean, the reality is that the structures are still there. We haven't figured out how to balance them out yet. And that's where, you know, a smart city is hopefully going to come into play, where we can figure out how to start moving this pendulum forward. The fact is there are more people who are being born every day. Our budgets are not necessarily increasing. So we have to move into automation in order to be able to get to deliver services to that number of people. I mean, we can't do it mano a mano, hand to hand. We can't have enough hands and people in the city to deliver the services. That's where we are now. And that's why we are failing miserably, is because we have to really get automated systems, and we have to bring all of those customers along. So, and that's where those budgets come into play and where the financing comes into play, because whilst we still need to project for the future, because young people in areas where right now we're dealing with a go-go, an older person and a person who's in their 40s and 50s who are not necessarily technologically savvy, but their children are engaging with technology on a daily basis doing this. They're doing it. So we have to start building a future for them, unfortunately. And those young people, as with anything else, it always is the young people who bring their parents along. So you start teaching them in schools and you start educating them, and then they help their parents along until they are the ones who then are managing the process. So, you know, we have to look at that in reality. And to the person's point, I think there was a question about is a smart citizen more important, or is it just a corporate requirement? Well, we need smart citizens because we need technology to help us to meet service delivery challenges. That's just a fact. We need automation. We need drones to find out where we're having problems with water leakages. You know, satellites who can tell us where those things are, so we can not wait for water systems to explode into the streets, but we can find out where the leak is happening while it's still underground. So, you know, it's a hodgepodge of things that we need to balance as a municipality. It's not an easy decision to make, and oftentimes we end up being responsive, because while we want to project budgets to automate in one particular area, then, you know, our electrical systems explode, and all of that money where you were projecting for the future has to be diverted into an immediate need. So I think when we're talking about the innovation and the partnerships, it's really getting everybody around the table. We are not going to change this country, these cities, if we do not become more collaborative with everyone, because everyone has an investment in the future of this country. If you want to continue making corporate money, you need to start helping to transition and to find the technologies and to help support the technologies and co-fund the technologies that are going to help you have a market that will help you to continue to get your profits. Similarly, on the community side, we need communities to help the municipalities find solutions that really talk to their situations and their problems and their challenges. And like I said, it's sometimes the smallest little tweak that we don't have a view to that will help us to completely change the experience that consumers on the ground are having. So as I said, ours is looking at how do we create going forward kind of a World Cup of service delivery. How do we bring all of these pieces together and really attack the challenges that we have as a city, just as we did getting ourselves up and ready for a World Cup? How do we set that standard, set what the mandate is for us to achieve that by a certain date, bring all hands on deck, the corporate sector, the funding sector, the institutions of learning, the volunteer sector, and how do we start cracking this and implementing? Stop all this talking, let's find the as is, let's find what those problems are, how much it costs to the solutions, how much those solutions cost, who is best placed to help us to implement, and then to start implementing. And we need to start doing this now. And then we can start talking about living in a smart city and how we have co-created a smart city that people say, yes, I live in a smart city because this is my experience.
No, thanks a lot for those inputs. And as we perhaps, I'll say, moving towards the end of our webinar, one of the questions that I would like you to handle, Monique, in your closing, is one that came from Daniel Nolte. Hi, Omden, from the Center for Municipal Asset Management, one of our partners in the work that we do, because it's more about the collaboration between the smart city concept, I would say, and the district development model, as to whether, and I know the metros are part and are classified, in fact, as a district for the purpose of the district development model. So as part of your closing, maybe you can also touch on that. And as I go to Philip and Alan, there is a question from an anonymous attendee, which is very important, because, for an example, you deal with data in the work that you do. And in South Africa and probably worldwide, the protection of personal information is one of the critical elements. How do you then navigate around privacy, data protection, considering the developments that we do? Because the moment you talk about a tech-based solution, it includes or involves personal data, personal information. If you can attend to that question, and perhaps one of you must attend to that question, because as I was saying towards the closing, there might be additions between yourself, Philip and Alan. You can perhaps just answer that particular question.
Alan?
Yes, I think from our perspective, we focus on service delivery of municipal services to a taxpayer, and municipalities. When it comes to Papia, it is focused a lot around the fact that I'm delivering the service to you. I can use your information in order to deliver the service to you. The sharing of information to anybody else is completely restricted. It is a big issue. It's still a discussion point where we have monthly meetings with different municipal officials on sharing personal information. I give you a typical example would be the complexity of one of the areas that we believe is essential in the smaller municipalities is not all municipalities would have engineers or town planners. And as part of our definition of being smart, a municipality like Springbok or one of those smaller municipalities might want to use an engineer from another municipality to provide comments on certain land use applications or building plan applications, and to get them involved where they share resources, a typical shared services environment. But now you are sharing to that municipality information that might be applicable to a building plan application, personal information, have access to personal information. That's where it becomes tricky. Another example would be is a district municipality who has to offer municipal health services, issuing COAs for food premises, has to obtain information that has been submitted to the local municipality. And that's just where the cross agency is becoming a problem. Even though it's still delivering a service to the individuals, it is not as simple anymore. So it is a complex area of to what extent certain information can be shared. And that's one of the stumbling blocks that we are running over today. But it's also the definition of personal information. By me sharing the layout of your stand, the contact person for the person on that stand becomes the one is personal and the other one is not that personal. But if there's a case of a disaster, of a cold front coming, and we have to let everybody know of the cold front coming, how do I not send a message? How do I not share your personal information to save your life? And I think that is the complexity that we are dealing with at the moment when it comes to personal information.
No, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Alan, for that, and thanks, Philip. And I think the concerns that keep coming up on, I'll say, privacy in general. It's one thing, I think, as the world, I would say in the near future, it's things that are happening now. As much as you might be talking about the protection of that information that is already within the system, within the entities, Alan. For an example, if I've got a drone that I operate, I'm making a typical example as one of the advancements and the developments that we have. The very same information on your stand, the layout of your house and everything else, a person can easily get hold of that information without having been provided through the system to which you were referring to, which therefore means the complexity of the world that we live in. It then also requires, perhaps as citizens, to take note of those, to say, you might have your information out there without even you knowing, because of how this data is collected and used ultimately. And as I've indicated, when we have these conversations, it always appears as if 2 hours is not enough, but it's not our idea to keep our guests and our audience beyond the allocated time, but it's more probably to have these sessions more in a fashion that will give the maximum benefit to all our participants. And as we start the wrap up towards the top of the hour, I will allow Trevor to come in based on the conversation that has been transpiring this morning, together with the work that the Ntiyiso Consulting Group is doing. What will be your closing comments, Trevor, based on, and again, the issue of I'll say citizen centricity is coming out quite prevalent in this conversation. Based on what has been discussed this morning and also what Ntiyiso is involved in, what would be your closing remarks, but also looking at the collaborations that we talk about, because from where I'm sitting, and perhaps with the understanding of the stakeholders around this platform who have provided inputs, it also provides a collaboration, a co-creation of these particular solutions in addressing what our citizens need on the ground. Over to you, Trevor.
Thank you, Zolani. Yeah, in regards to the work that we are doing as Ntiyiso Consulting, I know we have made a huge mark within the environment within the business where we come out as, revenue management, experts within the public sector, especially the municipalities. But however, what we thrive to achieve as an organization is the improvement of, the welfare of our citizens. Hence, I re-emphasize, customer centricity in our solutions. So I saw one of the questions that popped up that spoke to is smart cities, more of a corporate rather than, a social, benefit for the citizens. My take on this is actually more inclined to social benefit, because it builds efficiencies in the whole processes. It builds, that collaborative effort that we actually need to drive in regards to solutions. I'll go back to what Monique actually said, that, guys, when we look at the future, we need to take into consideration the young generation, and tapping into the innovative ideas that are actually sitting within the universities is actually one of the drives that we're actually also driving it as a business, that we need to absorb, the future engineers, the future leaders into this, corporate world. And these young guys in the society are the ones that are also taking along their parents within the, future of smart cities, because the only constant in this world that we're now living in is change, and we definitely need to adapt. If you go to the technical side of things, back in the days, I've got a passion of metering. Back in the days, you'd have your analog, water meters, but now wherever there's a water leak or wherever there's a meter that needs to be replaced, be it electrical, be it water, it has to be compatible with integration with other, technologies and other systems that are actually coming up within the market. And this is already the efforts that are being done at municipal level when it comes to adoption of future smart cities. And then these meters are then able to send signals, to your billing systems that also need to be upgraded as we go on. And it then closes the whole loop in regards to, efficiencies. People are now getting accurate bills when, the signals actually sent through to the billing system, and it eliminates the human errors that are picked up in our traditional way of, say, doing our meter readings. And it is those, baby steps that are actually being taken. And I guess that's why there's that prioritization at this point in time that talks to, your water and your energy, as these are immediate, soft spots rather that municipalities can actually start driving and implementing our smart cities. And obviously public safety in the current world that we are living in. I know there was a drive to come up, with panic buttons from, as a solution to actually safeguard, people and women, to be precisely, in regards to, rape and theft. And it is these things that, with the adoption and appreciation of technology and the drive to move and adoption to, the smart cities, we are able to then, beef up and drive better security within the public sector as well. Zolana, I'll end it here.
No, thanks a lot, Trevor, firstly for availing yourself and making the contribution and inputs to this session. And as you've made the comments, beyond the people centricity, from what I'm getting, it's also simplifying the business of a municipality, which also becomes quite a critical component in this smart city concept that we are looking in today. And as I give you an opportunity to just as also closing remarks, and by the way, thanks a lot for answering quite a complicated question that came through from Ukumo. I think you've touched or answered it in a manner that I would not have even thought of. Thanks for that. And also even Trevor touching on one of the questions that came from Kumo as well. So Lethu, as you sum up this conversation and based on the inputs and the comments that came from our panelists, what would be your closing remark, but also looking more on what is it that we can do better in ensuring that this lived experience that we are talking about actually reaches each and every citizen, though in a more longer term, but the steps that are being taken, the activities that are being implemented are basically taking us towards the future that we desire and aspire to live in. Over to you, Lethu.
Yes, thanks very much, Zolani. And firstly, just to thank all the other panel members for great inputs. It's been great hearing the different thoughts come in. It certainly is stuff or inputs that we are going to take and build into the work that we continue to do. I actually noticed as well that my colleague from the DBSA, Patrick Ntiyiso, managed to join the session. So I think he's also keenly been following the conversation. You know, in terms of the final remarks for me, it really is about the back to the people first principle and understanding that cities are first and foremost about people before anything and everything else. And then in building those principles in how cities think about solutions and in thinking about the technology that they invest in, there's then a more seamless understanding of how the technology can make life easier for individuals. I may not have mentioned this point in my earlier inputs, but if you have a look at many cities in SA where they've developed digital solutions like in terms of rates, etc., all these services that you find within a municipality, you would find that so many of the municipalities have siloed windows on Zolani. So you go to the rates department, there's an account for you there. You go to the energy department, there's a separate account. Or you go and try and do something related to social development and getting support for as an indigent, and there's a completely different account that exists there, right? Why? Because the city has not taken a single view of Zolani and ensured that whatever bit of data is being created around Zolani is shared amongst the city so that there is no duplication. So that's a key element around city efficiency. Then I'll hop on to this point again that Philip raised around business processing. We worked with another city I will not mention in case it's the one that you're located in, on a smart city strategy. And after bringing in all global experts and local resources, etc., and helping them, at the end of the day, what we said to the city was that you need to stop everything that you've been doing. Go and do a business process mapping of all your functionalities and realize where you are not being a smart city because you are duplicating functions from this department to that department. So, you know, I think there is an opportunity for cities to really take a step back. We know that it's such a topical agenda and it's a really interesting one. We want to get onto it and become the most smart city around. But the cities really need to take a careful look at what it means to become a smart city. Take a step back and think about all your internal city processes and build from a very solid foundation where you know that you're not duplicating, you're not minimizing your efficiencies by creating redundancies, etc. Yeah, let me pause it there so that it's not a sermon, but thank you very much for having me. It's been a great conversation.
No, thanks a lot once more, Lethu, and what we are grateful about, because we've created this platform for exactly that purpose of linking various stakeholders. And it's great that out of the session today, that opportunity also for yourself and the World Bank led to that, where you identify potential partners and stakeholders in the work that you do. And as I go towards the close, as I've been indicating, let me allow Philip just to also offer our audience the closing remarks and the parting shots, but most importantly, linking that to the conversation that has been taking place this morning. Over to you, Philip.
Zolani, thank you very much. I think just in closing, for us, it's been a huge privilege to participate in this discussion. And as an organization, we always encouraged by dialogue. And I think this is what we've seen today. We're going to be stuck with this, with the technology, trying to sort out the social issues for a very long time. It's not endemic to us as a country. It's a worldwide issue. They are facing similar issues in Sri Lanka and India and other great cities in the world. Overall, I think we're doing a great job. I don't think it's really that bad as you know, people would like it to or make it out to be. I think technology has stood us in good stead. We can do a lot more if we collectively apply our minds. I mean, if we look at what's happening in our major cities, all 9 of the metros, I understand that there are very specific challenges, but there are key points that are showing progress. And as an organization, we're very excited to be a participant in this national global initiative. And thank you so much for the opportunity and for everybody that hung around until 12. Thank you very much. Thank you, Zolani.
Okay, no, thanks a lot for that, Philip. Monique, let me offer you an opportunity, but also, as I've indicated earlier on, as part of your closing, the question that came from Omden in linking the smart city, the district development concept, and again to you as well. Thanks for availing yourself. Started and we received a message that you were joining late. I think all the panelists were, I would say they were concerned about you, but they felt that there would have been a gap if you didn't join. So thank you for joining us and gracing us with your presence. And I'll say from our side as the Municipal Future Cities Africa, and perhaps these entities, organizations that are participating, we are with you as the city of Joburg with all the challenges that you are facing. But again, I said earlier on, it doesn't mean what is happening should stop the great work that is taking place in other spaces within the city of Joburg. Over to you, Monique.
Thank you. Thank you again for inviting me to the panel. And anytime, I love to have these conversations. I think if you remove everything, remove the process, remove the technology, it all just boils down to one human element of caring. But if we can just care about the person that we're driving past, if we can just care about the people we work for, about the people in our household, then we will just make better decisions that will impact everybody, because we know that you help one person, you end up helping multiples of people. So separate and aside, why I want a smart citizen is because the smart citizen to me is a person who cares about the person next to them, and they, on a daily basis, in their homes, at their jobs, they are working towards the improvement of society, community, people. And technology is only an enabler that helps us to reach more people faster. So that's just the bare premise of what we need to be doing as officials, as humans, as employees, as corporations, et cetera. Just transparent. And then when we go into the DDM model, as my understanding is, it was slightly altered. So I hope I'm speaking to the same concept, which is just about how we as government engage with each other and interface in decisions that are joint decisions, so that we are, again, just operating smartly. Our budgets are operating smartly. And I think someone spoke about an incentive, my idea of how, national should be incentivizing all the districts and the cities based upon performance. And that's where technology should come in, to make sure that we are having objective criteria of performance, and not these little things that we tweak and change in order to make it look like we are performing, but our real life experience demonstrates that we are not performing at the level that we should be. So the wonderful thing, and why I keep referring back to the World Cup, is because there was no shirking the standard that was created by the World Cup officials and the LOC and the international community. We need to have those types of standards and that type of insistence upon the quality of what we are projecting for our citizens, the same way that we allowed ourselves to reach the criteria of an international organization. We need to be doing that for ourselves and for our citizens, and using smart measures to actually demonstrate that we are meeting those criteria. So national government should be using that objective technology to demonstrate whether or not on the ground those gains are happening, and then incentivizing municipalities for actually achieving by giving us more budgets to implement those things and to change and to make sure that the budgets are consistently flowing towards those improvements. So that, from my perspective, is I guess how I would like to close. And then, saying to our World Bank and DBSAs that, your support and our endeavors is greatly appreciated, even trying to bring all of the cities together so that we are being more efficient in the way that we are operating, and that the gains and the learnings that come from one municipality flow through to the next municipality. And, our next thing, as Collen rightfully said, is let's stop talking, let's start implementing, let's get that standard, get the technology that oversees the implementation, and that we are actually starting to change people's lives. And the on-the-ground experience demonstrates that, not our reports that we submit to the higher officials. Thanks.
No, that's wonderful, and thanks for those insightful closing remarks as well, Monique. And as I give you, Alan, your last parting shot, I just want to read one of the comments that just came through, and it somehow also summarizes what the conversation has been about around the people factor. From Patrick and Sina says, certainly it all starts with us as individuals. And I think that has come through the conversation itself. And he goes on further to say, mindset shift or change management within our municipal sector is the single most important step towards developing smart policies, smart budgeting processes, smart intervention. You can include smart procurement, and the list is endless. So it then again links to what we have been conversing about, but what is most important is the people factor, the human capital element of these innovations and developments that we are talking about. And Alan, your parting shot.
Yeah, I think, we focused around, there's a lot that's said around citizen-centric processes, but I do want to mention, for us, the smart city includes smart procurement. Suppliers, especially the local, to be inclusive, to allow people, the local citizens to participate in the municipal procurement processes are just as important. A building plan application. I think it was Philip the Western Cape that focused around building plans as a priority, and their argument was that the building plan is the start of the value process. The building plan, approval of building plan starts with the construction that employs people, that results in the revenue being generated by the municipality from a tax perspective once the building stands. And those are the type of balances that we spoke about. Monique spoke about the balancing act that we, and this is just one of those things that you was referring to, the balance between having these large corporates establishing a building plan electronically, attracting that construction into your municipal area, dealing with employment because they're employing the locals to earn an income, to be dignified, as well as the municipality starting to generate the revenue from a tax base. Those are the balances that we have to constantly focus on.
No, thanks a lot for that, Alan. And as you mentioned, the issue on smart procurement as well, and for the benefit of our audience and probably some of you as the panelists, this afternoon, virtually, the Chartered Institute of Government Finance Officers and Risk Officers is having a session just on smart procurement. If then one is able to join that session, you are more than welcome. Let me take this opportunity from my end to thank firstly yourselves as the guests to this particular conversation, but also the fact that it has been evident through the conversation itself that we are not only talking, but we are implementing on the ground and for the benefit of the citizens, because that what has come through quite evidently this morning. And secondly, is to thank our audience. Without you, we wouldn't have these conversations. Your contributions are always welcomed. Your questions as well, as you can see from the panelists themselves, the way they have addressed the questions in sharing the experiences that they have on the ground. But most importantly, the teams that I've indicated we work with. We've got Dan and Tim from the Municipal Edge. Thanks a lot for ensuring that this session takes place, and also from the Municipal Edge in terms of supporting and collaborating on this session. But also, as I've mentioned just now, we often work with Sigfaro and Salga in some of the sessions. And perhaps in absentia, we will thank them because some of these conversations are influenced by the work that those institutions are doing. Because Sigfaro, for an example, talks about in some of the areas together with Salga on professionalization, building the capacity, which is also something that has come through this morning. And on that note, we hope to see some of you in some of our webinars that are left for this year. And the next one being with a key focus on integrated development planning, which again, if we talk of smart cities, we can't talk smart cities without integrating our plans, the way we think, and the way we do things. And until we see each other again, take care and have a good one, and goodbye.